Welcome back. Class is in session here in Lecture Hall Room 101 of the Stately Apartment Academy. The Apartment Academy podcast is the multifamily's only operations-focused podcast featuring insights from industry leaders, investors, vendors, and technology providers. So if you invest in multifamily real estate or you're involved in the day-to-day on-site operations of apartment buildings, we are your source for efficient operations and maximizing ROI. Today, you're joining us for part 2 of our interview with Professor Steltenpohl, who, if you didn't listen to part 1, you're going to want to go back, listen to that version first, and then rejoin us here for some great insights. So, do you mind talking a little bit about the economics in a build to rent, like how those compare to our multifamily traditional?
It's an interesting. It really kind of depends. You have a couple of different ways of going about building it. You can use a traditional commercial builder, or you can use your traditional single-family builders, and you'll get various different pricing based upon that. So from a construction standpoint, and let's be honest, right now pricing on construction, God only knows what you're going to see tomorrow. With supply chain costs going through the roof, it's crazy how expensive it is to build these days, well above 200 feet. $200 a foot for a garden style suburban product. I mean, it's ridiculous.
As compared to what, 2 years ago?
2 years ago, maybe 150, 125.
Yeah, geez. I mean, that's going to blow some pro formas out of the water, right?
Yeah. So I can tell you 6 years ago, we did a project. It was our most expensive project to date, and it was $145,000 a door. I now have product that's over $400,000 a door. And that's,
you can't just build that. Like you
can't.
have to be able to charge rents that justify that, right? Yeah. So where are these people coming from who can pay 3 times the amount of rent that they were paying 2 years ago?
And that's just it, Daniel. It isn't 3 times. It's the margins have shrunk, the yields have shrunk, the returns have shrunk. You're getting a lot of it is getting made up on the sale side with the cap rate compression. It'll be interesting to me to see what happens once interest rates start to tick up. When interest rates tick up, obviously that's gonna eat into that yield, which is already incredibly compressed and reduced from what it was even 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was shooting for a 6.5, 7. Now I'm shooting for a 5.5, 5 3/4. And if you start jacking up interest rates, that 5.5 and 5 3/4 gets pretty reduced pretty quickly. So that's
5.5, 5 3/4. You're talking about return on investment.
Yeah, and return on cost. Yep. So you're going to start. Something's got to give somewhere. Where that is, who knows? But you're not getting the uptick in rents. I mean, yeah, obviously you can see the 20%, 30% rent growth. I think in Phoenix year over year, we're at like around 15%, depending on what numbers you're looking at. You'll see anywhere from 12 to 18%. So I call it 15. That's a far cry from the cost increases I've had on the construction side. And from a dollar standpoint, they don't match up. So, but rents have gone up, and that's why I think you're starting to see a whole lot. What does that mean from an operational standpoint? Simple. Number one is we're going to have to figure out affordable housing. Because if we don't, the government's gonna, and that's not gonna work. We've all seen their programs don't work. Let's just be honest. And then the second thing is the demands you have for services. When somebody's paying $800 a month in rent, and it's 15% of their income, their expectations are different than the person who's now paying $1,400 a month, and it's taking up 35% of their income. They're going to expect a lot more. And you have to find a way during a labor shortage in order to meet that requirement. And that's really the biggest challenge we have right now is keeping people, getting people, filling those gaps and providing that service. Because it does have to be an individual service at the end of the day. At least I believe that.
Is there, Justin, an amenity component of the change in expectations given rising rents, that sort of? Are you thinking about amenitizing your properties differently now as a developer than you were a couple years ago. Perhaps in response to a more demanding clientele, but perhaps also in response to things that you've learned that you from COVID that you believe will persist. For example, the work from home trend, right?
Right.
Is that shaping and coloring the way you guys are thinking about development?
Technology definitely does. Bulk Wi-Fi, how you develop, you actually need a lot more space for bulk Wi-Fi. You need different rooms with different cooling components, and they're not cheap. I mean, you have to build those rooms, and you don't get to charge rent for them. The other component you're running into, like you said, is from a COVID standpoint, the whole work from home, as well as just the overall freedom. People no longer have to live where they work. And we see a lot of that. We've had a huge influx of people from California and all over the country coming to Phoenix, especially during the wintertime. I mean, I don't know if you watched the Phoenix Open, but this weekend it was 81 degrees and sunny here. Welcome to Arizona. You might not want to be here in July, but in January, it's kind of the place to be. And so we're getting a lot of that. So we're doing a lot of the work from home, individual conference rooms or work rooms, if you will, along with conference rooms. And then technology. Think about it, 10 years ago, every decent apartment, class A apartment in the country had a theater room. We don't do theater rooms anymore. People watch them on their phones now. They don't need a big screen. So you'll see stuff like that. So it's really more, I don't think it's so much the expectation given the rent. You still have that. And I think that's going to be increasing in the future, especially at the ultra high end level, where I think you're going to get things like concierge type services where they'll help you get the good, hard to get reservation, membership type stuff, like the developer will partner with the high end gym, and they'll build a gym right next to the apartment where the apartment folks get to use the gym as part of their package, whereas everybody else in the community has to pay a membership. I think you'll start to see some of that. We were doing one project, I wanted to do that with a restaurant, a tap room, where we're going to have monthly memberships for our residents and we were going to lease the space out to a tap room. It ended up not working out, but I thought that would have been a great amenity. Have a rooftop deck, garden deck, and our residents can go down there with their membership in an exclusive area and drink, from the best local brewery in town. I thought it'd be great. Not that I'm
Sounds good to me.
not that I'm promoting beer. I've talked about it twice now, so it's
Yeah, no, but I like and respect the creativity and the desire to do something that helps residents consider it their home. And I'm sure you've read studies that show, to the extent that residents have friends in their place where they live, they're X times more likely to renew, and that's all important stuff as well.
Yeah, and the renewal rates these days are, you go back to build to rent, that's probably the biggest difference you'll see there. People stay in build to rent for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. That's not uncommon. And so your retentions are much, much higher in that. But we're actually seeing people signing on and retaining tenants at a much greater rate than we used to.
So, not to nerd out on the economics again, but I just want to go back to the build to rent versus traditional sort of multifamily kind of stick build idea. Is the cost to build, seems like on a unit basis, would be much less expensive on multifamily? I'm guessing.
It's economies of
And
scale.
attached.
Yeah, it's economies of scale. Obviously, if I can stack 4 units on top, my cost to build the units above it gets exponentially easier. I'm not pouring a foundation. I'm not doing other things. It's your land price tends to be lower, and so your overall cost per unit it's comparable.
It's comparable. Okay.
Yeah, it's comparable. It's going to be a little bit more in the build to rent, just as you said. It's an economies of scale. If I'm building 150 units versus 400 units, it's obviously cheaper to build on a per unit basis the 400 units. There's no doubt about it. But if I were to build 120 multifamily units and compare it to 120 build to rent, I think you would find that it's probably pretty close, or a lot closer than you would think.
But a premium on rent for a build to rent, though, I'm guessing.
We do about 10% premium. Yep. And then on the sales side, your cap rate is a little bit more compressed. I think the average build for rent in Phoenix is probably going around 400 right now, and the average, garden style 2-3 story walk up is probably, I'm spitballing here, but I'd say probably 340. If you're talking about Class A, you're probably closer to 380, 390 these days.
And so, you see the build to rent product as a trend that's here to stay for this, for the near future at least.
I do. Yeah, I absolutely do. Like I said, when they first came out, as a developer and operator, we kind of looked at it, turned our head a little bit like the dog, looking at it, saying, not so sure about this. We can understand the appeal. We always could. One of the biggest complaints you have in an apartment is the noise, and you've kind of eliminated that. But you also don't have that community feel like you typically would in a regular community. Um, at the end of the day, it ended up proving itself out. It is evolving. When they first came out, BuildtoRent first came out, they didn't have amenities. There was no swimming pool. There wasn't any of that stuff. Now you're seeing that. You're seeing the workout, the gyms, the pools, the community centers, and things like that as the product continues to evolve and grow. Um, and I definitely think it's here to stay. I think it is a good trend.
Yeah. Well, you had your Colony American Homes and your Invitation Homes just buying huge, numbers of geographically disparate homes. I mean, you can't have an amenity, but now if it's purpose built,
That's
you
right.
can have a different experience. Yeah.
Even the first purpose-built ones didn't have amenity packages. The very first ones. Yep.
Got it. That makes sense. Makes sense. Um, Let me just sort of switch. But well, and before I do that, any other trends on in the construction technology side that PB Bell is watching? Marketing, like a lot. We haven't really talked a lot about marketing yet because I don't know that how much you have to get into on the marketing side of things. But any other trends you guys are watching that you want to share with the folks that are listening? Things what's going to be important in the next year and a half?
I'll be honest with you. Right now, we're focusing. It really is labor. It's amazing to me what a labor shortage. And anybody who goes to Starbucks on a daily basis, I don't know if it's the same where you are, but I can tell you half the Starbucks are closed. The other half aren't doing mobile orders anymore. It's just crazy. And so I think that's a perfect example of what we're experiencing, not only on an operational side, but on a construction side. It's hard to get the subs. It's hard to get people into working. I don't know where these people are going, but it is difficult. We've had maintenance positions posted for 6 months and haven't had a single person apply. That's unheard of. So really that, and then you add to that, the other biggest issue that we're looking at and just kind of trying to figure out how to address it is the whole supply chain issue. Do I order 27 replacement washers even though I don't need any right now because who knows in 3 months if I'm going to be able to get one? Whether it's a part, whether it's a light switch, whether it's, I bought a car, I can't have the mobile charging anymore because the chip for the mobile charging isn't being made, you know. So it really, or the wireless charging, excuse me, it really, that's the big issue, and that affects construction, rehabs, it affects your maintenance, it affects everything. Different supplies just disappear. And how do I plan for that? Because I don't know what you're reading, but the stuff I'm reading, they're saying the supply chain issues are here till 2024, and that's a long time to be dealing with it.
Well, that's interesting. That even given if it gets resolved by 2024 is still a fleeting problem. Whereas I think my guess is the labor shortage is a structural issue that's changed and changed forever.
Mm-hmm.
And in a world where you're talking about squeezing margins in return because construction costs are going up faster a pace than rents, now you're faced with the prospect of having to probably pay people a lot more than you used to get them interested in the industry, to get them to stay. I'm guessing those things are being contemplated.
Absolutely. My pro formas, I used to underwrite 3 years ago, $1,200 a unit annually for salaries. I'm up to 1,800 now.
Wow. How do you make room for that? Is it just you can't other
My
aside from
my caps are compressed, my yields are compressed, my rents are increasing. It's everything. It really is, because we haven't taken we haven't. Nor do I think we're going to really change our model and reduce people. Our people are stressed enough. Like you said, it's hard. and I'd rather have three people for the residents to yell at, for lack of a better phrase, than just have that same person constantly inundated with negativity. That team mentality helps, and I think it helps us be, kind of the standard bearer in operations. And so we're never going to get rid of that. I'm not gonna reduce and overwork my people. I'm not going to do that, because that just doesn't work in this industry, especially given the labor issues you have. I need my folks to be happy, so they want to be here.
Is there anything you can do aside from the other things you mentioned, which are paramount importance, which is training and recognition? Is there any area where technology can come to the rescue here on making things quote unquote easier on your folks on site?
We're certainly looking at. We actually hired recently an individual to look just at that. What type of software is available, what type of programs are available, what type of technology is available to make it easier on our folks to kind of take some of that burden off them. It's definitely an area we're looking at. Technology changes all the time, and you have to be able to stay on top of that. Ironically enough, I think a lot of it is actually increasing, because you have these smart homes, and now I've got to go explain to people how they work their smart home and how they work their lock, and what do you mean you can't raise the temperature in your unit? And they come to me with their app questions. We actually, in our models now, we have an Alexa, an Echo Dot, that literally is programmed to answer questions about smart homes and how to program things. So we're starting to do that as a way to try and eliminate the number of questions people ask on stuff like that. So that's a way technology is actually increasing our workload. It's so we're looking at it. And like I said, we've hired to try and see if we can find some solutions to eliminate that burden.
Yeah, yeah. Well, last question for you, because we're running up against our time. Is there anything that you learned since you've been in the business that you didn't anticipate? The one thing that, if you had known this one thing before you got into multifamily operations, that you wish you had known beforehand, what would that be?
This cycle was going to last forever. I go back. This has been an incredible cycle. Phoenix is the number one builder next year. Number one builder in the country. We're bringing more units on than any other city in America, and that's on top of the 60,000 we've already put on in this cycle. It's incredible. I think the other thing that I wish I would have really taken into account and would have changed some of my, not only my operational stuff, but my overall strategy as a company, is there's never been an individual recession for multifamily. Any recession in multifamily is correlated with a recession in different industries, and usually multiple different industries. And I wish I would have just been a little bit more bullish.
Would you, if you were getting into investment now, is now a time to start investing in multifamily, or is it now riskier than ever given the dynamics we just discussed?
Daniel, I am not going to answer that question, because I remember in 2017, I was asked at a panel if there was anything in the last year that I regretted doing, any transaction. And I started laughing. I said, yeah, every single one. I regret not buying every property that was presented to me. I regret selling everything. And I would say that today as well. It has been, the music's got to stop sometime, but I have given up trying to predict when that's going to be. And so I would say, if you want to get into multifamily, get into multifamily. It's a great business to be in.
Wiser words are never spoken. Music has to stop sometime, but we have no idea when that's going to be.
And all the fundamentals keep pointing to this lasting at least another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, maybe at least in markets such as Phoenix and Southern California, right? Yeah. Well, Dr. Steltenpohl, Professor Steltenpohl, thanks for joining us today. It was a great discussion. We don't often get into talking a little bit about development, and we focus so much on operations. This was a real joy to sort of take a little departure down a developer's perspective on things. So thank you for taking the time to spend with us today.
I appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
Thanks. You take care. Well, that's a wrap on today's lecture with today's elbow patch festoon professor of multifamily science, Justin Steltenpohl. I hope you took good notes, although the only test that you'll have awaits you every day in the leasing office. We thank you for logging in and listening once again. If you've enjoyed these podcasts and you feel like your management company could use a little advice from some of the professors here at the Apartment Academy, then go to our website, apartmentacademy.com, and click Help Me. We'll send you a questionnaire and provide individualized responses to your answers at no charge that I guarantee will offer you insights on ways that you can immediately improve apartment operations. Until next time, class dismissed.